It's time for This Week in WordPress, episode number 174, entitled, We've All Got the Same Arm and Mic. It was recorded on Monday the 16th of August 2021. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and I'll be joined, as always, by my co-host Paul Lacey. This week, we also have Brian Gardner as well. I've been on holiday for a couple of weeks, so there's a bit of catching up to be done, and we do just that. First thing we talk about is WordPress 5.9 and some of the updates, hopefully going to be coming very soon to WordPress. We also get into a conversation off the back of a podcast episode I recorded with Corey Miller for WP Tavern, all about mergers and acquisitions, and that then naturally leads into a conversation about the fact that Yoast has been acquired. David von Gries from the Page Builder Framework has made a video this week asking the question, is Guttenberg killing WordPress themes? We talk about the toolset Query Loop Block and how it compares to the default one, which comes with WordPress. Automatic have invested $30 million into Titan, an email company, to help you get your email set up over at WordPress.com. And Apple this week is in the news about their endeavours to protect children via iOS, iCloud, and the photographs you may have on your phone. It's all coming up next on This Week in WordPress. This Week in WordPress was brought to you by A/B Split Test. Do you want to set up your A/B split tests in record time? The new A/B Split Test plugin for WordPress will have you up and running in a couple of minutes. Use your existing pages and test anything against anything else. Buttons, images, headers, rows, anything. And the best part is that it works with Elementor, Beaver Builder, and the WordPress block editor. Go check it out and get a free demo at absplittest.com. Hello. Welcome back. We've had a bit of a hiatus. We've had a bit of a break. 2 weeks off. I sat on a beach and did very little. It was remarkably good. But time and tide wait for... Oh, time and tide. See the beach reference there. Very good. You have to get back to work, sadly. So here we are. Episode number 174 of the WP Builds This Week in WordPress show. Joined, as always, by my co-host Paul Lacey, who's obviously also had an enforced 2-week break. How's your break been, Paul?
It's been great to not have to. Oh, sorry. I mean, I missed you so much, Nathan. No, I'm glad that you had a good break and everything, and obviously I was too lazy to do the show by myself, or lazy or incapable, one of those two things. But yeah, we might be a bit rusty. I don't know. Let's see. Let's see how we get on.
There's only so much polishing you can do of this proverbial. I'm not going to say the words. But we're joined today. We're supposed to be joined by two people, but only one of them has actually made it through. And you never know. Last time we had Jonathan Wold and Brian Gardner on, and Brian came in a few minutes later. Maybe this time around it'll be the other way around, because we've got Brian Gardner, who probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but Paul's going to introduce him in a moment. But Jonathan Wold is supposed to be joining us, but if he doesn't, we'll plow on regardless. Yeah. So hand over to you, Paul, to introduce our honourable guest, Brian.
Well, we're really pleased again to have Brian Gardner on the show, who has shortened his profile considerably down to WordPress expert and creator of Frost. And by Frost, we're not talking about the weather phenomenon. We're talking about Frost WP, which is a kind of new WordPress theme all built around WordPress blocks. Brian, obviously, is also, he didn't put it in his profile, but is also the original founder of StudioPress, which created the Genesis theme. And also, last time, recommended some films to me. I've nearly finished, Brian, Aspen Extreme, and really enjoying that. Me and my wife have been watching it together. We got very tired towards the end because it was quite late. So we're not sure what's going to happen in the final, the Powder 8 competition. We'll find out. So anyone who's watched Aspen Extreme knows what I'm talking about. So no spoilers, please. We don't know what's happening in the Powder 8. But I was super pleased to see a shock appearance from Martin Kemp from Spandau Ballet, being one of the baddies in the film. Martin Kemp is obviously a British guy, but he plays a baddie German guy called Franz, which no
spoilers though. There's no baddie called Franz in there whatsoever. No. Is that a TV show?
No, it's it's an early 90s film.
Oh,
Something got, so it's all around skiing, and me and Brian were talking about films about skateboarding and BMXing and all that sort of stuff. And he recommended a couple of films to me, and one of them was Aspen Extreme, and I like it. It feels like it's got a bit of a Dirty Dancing feel to it, which I know is
Yeah.
underselling it, and you're probably disappointed with that, Brian, but there's some definite plot similarities in there as well.
Yeah, I am a sucker for 80s and 90s nostalgia on several levels. Movies are one of them. Cheesy coming of age movies like Aspen Extreme and Thrashin' and North Shore and Rad. I grew up sort of a lot of my time in California, so like the BMX, the surfing, the skateboard stuff like was totally in my wheelhouse. So
how did you like Stranger Things? I know that's a modern thing, but it kind of goes back to that BMX sort of tape cassette thing. No.
What it is I'm trying to figure out how to dodge the question, because I actually have not watched that.
Okay, that's fine. It's fine. I really enjoyed it, but it's like it almost feels like a Spielberg movie, like Close Encounters or something like E.T. You know, you got.
I'm not a sci-fi guy, so that's why I was like,
no, it's not.
Maybe
it's so sci-fi. Yeah, don't bother. Just curious, actually, Brian. Now that we obviously did get your, your little biography, which was very short and had been curtailed to WordPress Expert and Frost, is that a conscious thing? Have you sort of, are you now no longer saying founder of StudioPress, or is that just something you omitted accidentally?
No, there's no omission. More than anything, it's just an act of brevity. In fact, as Paul was saying that, I'm like, there's no reason. It's not like I'm embarrassed. I mean, I'm super proud of it.
Yeah.
And especially now that I'm, we'll say quote in air quotes here, kind of back in WordPress product building. For context purposes, it probably makes sense. And what it does allows me to reintroduce two other things that I love doing. Because then the Twitter bio would have equal lines, because I'm also OCD when it comes to that. And that is the inclusion of being a runner and being a Taylor Swift fan. So both. And I just literally, and I went out early so I could be back for the show, because it's 8:00 here in Chicago. I just got back from a 7-mile run listening to Taylor Swift. So
no, you've done 7 miles and it's 8 in the morning. Oh.
Yep.
There's just no way I'm going to compete with that. Honestly, if I'd done 7 miles, I would be dead on a sofa for the remainder of the day. That's very impressive.
Yeah.
Well done. So are you like a serious, do you compete? Are you really or is it just for personal fitness?
Personal, whatever. I compete against myself. Back in the day, I ran to run for times and stuff like that. In fact, there's a running shirt that goes around now that I see every once in a while. It says the older I get, the faster I was, which is so true. And I'm like, I don't have the energy to, I run for my own time, trying to hit personal goals, but yes.
Well, congratulations. Honestly, like a third of a marathon. No, a quarter-ish. Well done. Before 8:00 in the morning. That's ridiculous. Very impressive. I'm just going to put the screen on, just let you know what we're doing today. This is our website, wpbuilds.com, where we introduce a new podcast each and every week. Comes out on a Thursday. We obviously do this weekly WordPress news show. This Week in WordPress, it's called, and it comes out on a Monday. Well, we do the live on a Monday, and then we republish it on a Tuesday morning. If you want to stay up to date with that, you can click onto this little form here on the website and subscribe, and we will keep you informed about all the things that we're doing each week. Just on some housekeeping news, if you are watching this live and you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine. If you're on Facebook, your profile and photo will not come across unless you click on the button. It's there's a little button at the it's not a button, it's in the text of the post. You've got to go to chat.restream.io/FB and then click a button and it will enable us to see your picture, a bit like Cameron did. Got Cameron. Oh, he's on YouTube, so that's slightly different. But anyway, if you want to make some comments, please feel free to do that. The other thing to say is, well, if you've got any comments, just drop them in and we'll try to put them on the screen if they're suitable and on message, then we'll do that. But that's it, really. We'll crack on with the news, and we've got a fair few bits and pieces. Now, I feel some of this might be a little bit older than we would normally do. Normally we cover the previous 7 days, but I've been on holiday for the previous 14, so a couple of these pieces might be rehashes that you've seen elsewhere. But nevertheless, there's some value in it, so we'll mention all of those. And it's actually not me that's kicking us off today. It's going to be Paul. He's going to be talking about WordPress 5.9.
Yeah, so we got 5.8 already. So we're now thinking ahead already to 5.9. And Mateus Ventura has done a post on make.wordpress.org, which is called Preliminary Road to 5.9. And he's highlighting some of the different things that we should expect to see in 5.9. It seems to me like most of the things they're talking about here will definitely make it into 5.9 because they all seem reasonable in terms of scale, I imagine. But there's a partner post on the WP Tavern by Justin Tadlock that's called Early WordPress 5.9 Look, the Road Towards Deeper Responsive Block Design. But Justin's article focuses mainly on the responsive side of things, but Mateus's main post is about more or less everything that they're doing. But some of the highlights in there are obviously the responsive design aspects that they're going to try and focus on for blogs. So whether you're creating a design for desktop and then you want it to look good on tablets or mobiles and stuff like that, which is always a challenge, especially if with the block editor you don't have a pure visual representation of what you're seeing. So they're going to try and address that, which is great news for anybody who's using the block editor at any level, whether you're using it for full sites or a page builder replacement, or you're using it like me just for simple things like blog posts and stuff like that. To give a little bit of context on the problem around responsive design that a lot of people would get, especially if they're not designers, is what happens when one block hits another block. Especially, so if you've got a light colored block hitting a light colored block, how much padding should be between those two blocks vertically? Whereas if you've got a light block hitting a dark block, should the padding be different or the margins be different accordingly? So hopefully what they're going to do is find a way that makes that less of a problem for people and improves how websites tend to look online. Because what you will see sometimes in blog posts, especially with the block editor now, is a paragraph and then there's a big gap on mobile and then there's another paragraph. You're wondering, why did they put that big gap there? And the user didn't. They just didn't really, understand how to make that look good on the mobile there. A few of the other good things that they seem to be interested in sorting out is more of a sort of design system for colors, typography, spacing, and layout. At the moment, we've got third-party vendors. Me and Nathan were talking before the show about vendors like Cadence Blocks and Stackable, for instance, who basically had to invent their own way of managing things like typography and colors consistently across all their different blocks. But it looks like the core team is going to try and address this. And the screenshot that I see on the makewordpress.org looks like a very sensible approach, where there is they've broken down, for instance, presets like the ability to choose a large, medium, or small, which might be built into the theme, for instance. But then you can get more granular. You can choose the font size and the line height and those kind of things. But how these initial designs look makes a lot of sense to me, which is a pain point for sure for users who are using multiple block sets. I was in the back end, or I saw a screenshot of the back end of a major WordPress brand the other day, and this brand had 5 block sets on there. So five full block sets. So there was probably something like 150 blocks, third-party blocks installed on this, and obviously all of them would have had their own way of coping with the typography and the colors because there wasn't a core way at the beginning when those early developers started. So this will hopefully create some good stuff for the future on that sense. And also, now I don't know what this means, and I want to chuck this one over to Brian in a minute. But apparently, another thing they're doing is an interface for theme.json. I don't fully understand what theme.json is. I see you talking about it, Brian, from time to time, and excited about certain things that you can do with it. So maybe we should start there and then come back to the responsive stuff and the typography stuff. So yeah, Brian, do you know, is this stuff about theme.json good news for us all, and is it good news for you?
Yes and yes. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but I'm hopefully trying to disprove that here with what WordPress is doing. I attempted to sort of dodge that situation. Ultimately, when we sold to WP Engine, I wasn't sure I had the energy and thought I would want to go do something else, but I was uh, sorely mistaken. That being said, when I decided to sort of come back and build WordPress products, I made the commitment to myself that not only would I do it, quote, the WordPress way, I would also do it the WordPress way, which means I would not try to reinvent any wheel, and I would push myself to learn things that I didn't know anything about. And the theme.json stuff is sort of like a current example of something that shipped in WordPress 5.8. And I have ad nauseum been immersing myself in it, trying to push it in terms of like understanding what it is, how it works, kind of, and all of that. To answer the question in terms of the interface for theme.json, I love what I see. I love this whole post. I think Matthias has quite a bit of sort of a design background coming into this project. And so from my perspective, I always appreciate that because things look good and feel good. What I see in that screenshot in particular makes me really happy. I know that several, and we had to deal with this at Studio Press, right? We, even over the years, just people would install plugins and plugins would do different things. And this was even before blocks, like, oh, this doesn't look good with your theme. And because it's, plugins have their own styles, and unlike some of the contact form plugins, there's no way to sort of disable those styles. One of the things I love most about contact forms like WP forms and Ninja forms is that there's like that little option that turns off styles, right? Removes the opinionation, which allows the theme to do it, which is, I think, sometimes better experience.
Mhm.
So that being said, what I love most about the theme.json stuff is that it really it removes the need to have styles both in the theme style sheet and in the editor style sheet. What this does, it brings parity in one place. If you define something in theme.json, not only does it output on the front end, it also outputs in the editor. And there's only one place there. A lot of times, half of my block editor style sheet was a carbon copy of what was in the style sheet. And every once in a while, I'd forget to copy things over and paste, right? Because you've got to, the goal here is to serve up a similar experience on the back end and the front end. And while it's easy to do in two different places, it's easier to do when you have it in one place.
Right. Yeah. That it looks really clever. I've got to just going to put that photo up on the screen now. If you're listening to this, we've got the blog post over at make.wordpress.org, the Maton, and links in the show notes, by the way. And it's got what looks to me like this kind of is how I always wanted it to be. I don't know if it is supposed to be laid out like this, or is this just a screenshot? Is everything going to be arranged horizontally in this way? In other words, are we just looking at different adaptations of the same settings, or are they hoping? Yeah, darn.
I think Murphy is one thing, and each column shows a different.
Yeah. I was really hoping that it was just going to be things put next to each other instead of like in the customizer where you constantly scroll and get lost. It just strikes me that in the Guttenberg era where we can use the whole screen, that might have been quite a nice thing to have. So it makes things easier, basically, from a theme development point of view. You just have to you use less time. You do things once, and it's in one place, and everybody's happy. That's nice. The question that Paul raised, I guess, is going to be something that the block pack people, the likes of Stackable and Cadence, they've made up their own way of doing this, and I presume it would be in their best interest at some point to hop on board the way that it's going to be done in full site editing, so that it's easy for them to maintain and decouple from what they've already created. But I suppose they had to go around doing it that way because otherwise they wouldn't have hit the market with something that allowed them to do things like global styles and so on. So yeah, we'll have to wait.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about. That it seems that if the blocks will have like this kind of more fully featured design tools for typography and colors and stuff like that, that some of the original block packs like Stackable and Cadence might have to walk back some of their things. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of inconsistency. But at the same time, they probably had to make a decision. If we wait until it's all done, we won't be new to the market. We won't get that big boost to our PR and everything. So we'll launch now. We'll invent our own design system. And if we can walk back on it to a certain extent than we will later, I imagine, is what they're thinking.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
chatted to Ben Intel for a podcast a little while ago. He's
In
the
Stackable.
founder of Stackable, and he said exactly that. They just made the decision that they were going to go their own way, and then when things became more consistent and clarified, then they would just essentially unpick everything that they'd done and try to make it work in the sort of the WordPress way. So yeah, that's interesting. So the article goes into more. It goes into endeavors to make patterns more useful, patterns directories, and so on. And then formalizing editing workflows for block themes. But Matthias is bullet points, and it's a little bit harder to read straight off the bat. But if you go to the WordPress Tavern article, just in Tadlock's one, again linked in the show notes, then you'll get the more prosaic version. So yeah.
Can I ask Brian about Frost WP relation to this? So, for instance, let's say Genesis, you would release a Genesis child theme. It would have a CSS file where all the style was kind of defined in there. In my own experience, for instance, I've done some templates for Beaver Builder that are releasing soon, and the only way I can guarantee, for instance, typography across the board is to put some CSS in with the templates, because I don't know which theme is going to be trying to override that. And also in my comments in the CSS, I'm saying you can probably remove this if your theme covers that. So what I'm wondering with theme.json, how much, if any, CSS would you need to deploy one of your sort of I don't know if I call them child themes, but inside your starter sites in Frost WP, you have a bunch of different starter sites. Assuming block editor and Guttenberg goes the way that we think it's going, would that mean you would have no CSS in your starter sites, or would you still need some for certain aspects?
So the short answer is, I think the ultimate goal is to try to minimize. I don't think there's ever an instance in which Gutenberg or the block editor or WordPress will result in zero CSS. I think there's just too many things outside of what I think WordPress should serve up sort of at a core level. Transitions, I think, were kind of always a thing that I've seen, animation effects, things like that, where there's really no good way to do that just in a GUI. And so on some level, there will always be a need for a style sheet. Currently, the Frost style sheet with theme.json, here's some transparency, is still 1,700 lines long. There's still so much. And mainly because right now, I've made the decision as a shippable product not to rely on Gutenberg. I got a dog barking here.
Don't worry, I've got one here as well.
I've made the decision not to do anything production ready that requires Gutenberg, just because Gutenberg's evolving and there's breaking changes, and I don't feel I don't feel good about serving that up and requiring that, because that breaks production sites for folks, and that's really bad. So so that being said, I'm intimately acquainted between the differences in theme.json that WordPress core currently allows, what Gutenberg currently allows. They kind of unpack it a little bit more, and so basically, the way it started was when I started playing with the theme.json, I started with the blank file and just looking at the tutorials. I think Carolina's got a really good one out there. Like there's the fullsiteediting.com site has been super helpful in all of this. Is I would just introduce a theme.json and then go back into the two style sheets and figure out, okay, what does this cannibalize basically? What does this remove the need to have? And so like little by little, I think my theme.json file is a couple hundred lines long. And so like it's pulled stuff out of the style sheets, and it's just going to be a moving target. That being said, for clarity's sake, Frost's theme is only one theme. It's a child theme at Genesis right now. And anything that we see in the starter sites doesn't require, quote, additional CSS. That's just all baked into the main theme, and sort of the patterns and the presentation of everything sort of inherits either the block editor controls kind of by way of the main Frost style sheet. And so Frost is only one theme, and the starter sites are just basically imported content and patterns to get people going. So
got it. That's cool.
Yeah.
It seems that you're going a route that is very low risk in terms of, for instance, we were talking about a video from David von Gries from Page Builder Framework in a while. And he obviously has a theme that's been around before, the block editor, and now he's got to try and work around it. And then you've also got, Cadence and Stackable and those sort of people creating their own blocks. It seems to me that what you said earlier about that you're going the WordPress way completely means that you're deliberately avoiding conflicts with the project all along the way, which is pretty unique. I'm not just saying that just to stroke your ego or just to pat you on the back there, but I think there's a lot of blog posts out there. I saw by John James. There was a Twitter thing by Chris Wiegman, I think that's how you say it, and some follow-up posts by John James Jacoby about how difficult it is to get into WordPress. And then Mateus from WordPress.org was saying, no, we're trying to make it easier for people to get in. And you can see that if you're fighting if you're fighting to do it the old way, then you probably are fighting against the tide. But there isn't many people going against it with the tide. It seems that you are doing that, and that seems relatively unique to me. I'm not too aware of, because most people are going for like, let's create loads of blocks, let's try and create what people could do before. So it'll be interesting to see, and hopefully you'll come on again as 5.9 and whatever comes after 5.9 comes out, how much you are able to keep transitioning out of that style sheet and and making it as streamlined as possible. I don't know if I've understood that right, but that's what I'm observing from Frost. It's some people might say, oh, it doesn't do as much as this, but I seem to see it be deliberately going at this from a completely different angle than anyone else seems to be going with.
Do you guys remember the Tim Thumb Fiasco from, I don't know how long you guys, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I remember to this day, we had originally Nathan Rice and he was a co-creator of Genesis. To this day, I remember where I was, and I always tell the story. I may have even said this here before. We had put Tim Thumb into Genesis as the image resizing script, right? We basically wanted to,
we all did.
Magazine sites were, and we had implemented that, had not shipped it yet. And I was at a Chase Bank in Schaumburg, Illinois, when he had literally just finished implementing it. WordPress featured image capability resizing kind of became a thing in core. And I said to him, hey, I think we really need to just pull Tim Thumb out and replace it with the WordPress and leverage that. And shortly thereafter, that's when the whole Tim Thumb, exploitation, security fiasco went down. And it kind of taught us a lesson. And at that point, we really doubled down on always serving up sort of, expected WordPress behavior, even from our settings pages, inheriting, UI that's within the dashboard and stuff like that. And thankfully, it's gotten better just inside of core. And so I've always sort of defaulted to just going that route. I don't have any need, or I don't have a vanity issue where I need to create my own version of the WordPress dashboard. I don't need to, put my logo inside of it and do things that other people have done. And it's just easy. We always thought Genesis was so good because nobody knew where like WordPress started and Genesis ended. Like it was just like a seamless thing where you're like, oh, am I in WordPress? This makes sense. This is what I expected this screen to look like and stuff like that. So, so yes, you are correct. Frost is that way. And regarding blocks and first of all, I don't know how to build blocks, so there's that. But second of all, half of the blocks that people put into these mega catalogs end up getting cannibalized by WordPress anyways, right? Like, I think early on there were some folks that were there and said, hey, here's some awesome blocks. And then like a month or two later, they're in WordPress core, which then reduces the value of the block libraries. Yeah. So if I were to, and I've said this before, if I were to ever do any kind of block anything with Frost, it would be more in like the vertical sense. Like we would build blocks that were specific to an industry that really solved a problem, not just to say we've had a block library of 100 different blocks that you could use anywhere else. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's Peter Ingersoll in the comments saying basically that the ongoing challenge of having a favorite third-party solution versus when WordPress catches up and deciding how best to proceed. It's interesting actually because you've come to the market. I don't know if it was from everything that you said, it may be that you didn't sort of deliberately wait it out. It was just the inspiration came to you at the time when it did. But in a way, if you'd have jumped in right at the beginning, you yourself would be having to unpick all this legacy. But you've come in at the point where there's maturity, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there already, and you're good to go. It's nice. I had the website up just a second ago. If you want to check out Frost, then go to frostwp.com. and you'll see a very nice website showing off all of Brian's.
And Brian specifically said, oh, don't make this episode a sales pitch, but we're interested because it's very interesting the news items we've got.
Yeah.
They're very Gutenbergy this week, and they're very Gutenbergy at the moment.
No, I'm happy to push that on the screen.
By the way, if little doggy needs some attention, then feel free to drop out for a few minutes.
I was just gonna put that in the notes. Give me like 2 seconds. I'm just gonna open the door.
Go ahead.
We'll crack on with the next bit. That's fine. Okay, so thank you, Peter, for your comment, and hello, Maya. I'm expecting that's Maya.
Hi, Maya.
Longcar, but I haven't got Facebook open. But if you wish, Maya, to have your name, then click on that URL. There we go. And you'll be, not click on it, chat.restream.io/Facebook if you want your details to come across. Okay, there we go. Let's move on quickly then. We're moving on now. Let's leave that behind. We're going to go on to acquisitions. Now, this is pure coincidence, but I did a podcast episode recently with a gentleman that we've all heard of before, Corey Miller, formerly from iThemes, now the owner of Post Status, which is a fabulous place to find all sorts of WordPress communities and news. And we talked over at WP Tavern on the podcast I do over there about the acquisitions landscape and the mergers landscape. It was a really interesting conversation. Really, the only reason I'm mentioning this is because it fits in beautifully with the next item. But I was quite interested to hear Corey's take on this because he has Brian also will have a unique take on this. But Corey obviously has been through this, selling iThemes. Brian obviously selling Studio Press to WP Engine, and we talked through the good and the bad. We split the conversation into good and bad, and there were so many things that came out of that conversation that I didn't expect. Just as an example, things like healthcare for the people working in the companies. And anyway, I would highly encourage you to listen to that. It is a really nice, it's a conversation much more than previous episodes we've done. So go and check that out. But the reason it's relevant is because I'm sure that you have not managed to avoid this piece of news this week. I really didn't see this coming. Of all the companies in the WordPress space that I kind of felt like it's not going to be bought out, it's too big, it's going to be doing the buying, Yoast was probably right near the top of my list. And yet we have the piece of news that Yoast joins Newfold Digital. Marika van der Act and her husband Yoast have basically, for an undisclosed amount of money, I say it's undisclosed, it's not disclosed in this article, maybe it's public elsewhere, but they've sold, and their 140 employees are going to go over and work under the umbrella of Newfold Digital. The interesting thing here, it's the usual trope that comes out, nothing's basically going to change. The reason that we've sold it is because it will allow us to have access to money that we wouldn't already have. It was quite interesting. If you actually read this piece, and I can't remember exactly where it is now, they did mention the fact that they had anxiety, both of them, about the future, and they found that the fact that they were bootstrapped the whole time, they've never taken money before, it led them to be a little bit more, perhaps conservative is the right word, with the way that they approach the business. And so they mentioned, I can't remember the exact wording, but basically that they were more cautious than they thought they could have been in the past, which is intriguing. It's an insight I didn't really think about. And so this hopefully will give them access to ready money, and we'll see how this goes. But a bit of a shock. I think the main angle of shock came not from the fact that Yoast had sold, but because of where it had been sold to. The parent company, Newfold Digital, has a whole bunch of companies beneath it. And I saw all sorts of commentary, which was, concerned, let's just put it that way, about who they had sold to. So really, I'm just going to open the floor up to Paul and Brian, what they think about this deal. Is it inevitable that this will make things better for them? Will it make things better for the end users? Who knows? I'd love to know how much money was changing hands for this as well.
I've got some thoughts. First of all, I'm not surprised that they were sold, and I'm also not surprised. I'm not surprised that EIG or Newfold bought them, because that's a company with the amount of money you need to buy Yoast. So there's not many companies that could do that. I'd be kind of less surprised if Automatic had bought Yoast, because they seem to be buddies and at the corporate level for they probably have their stands next to each other at all the shows and all that kind of thing. So Automatic probably had the money but maybe didn't feel the need, and they've obviously bought something else. So it was one or the other.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think good. First of all, well done
Yeah.
to the founders of Yoast for building something so successful, and we can only guess how much this was sold for. And people on Twitter are guessing like anything from $6 to $30 million, and we'll probably never find out. But it's going to be a huge amount of money, and they'll be able to put that into the product, I think. Now,
Just before
go
the call, Paul and I were talking about this, and we were saying, no matter where you stand, and so, for example, Cameron in the comments is saying, congratulations to Yoast and Marika, but the EIG, is that right? Is it EIG?
Yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
He said it leaves a bitter taste in his mouth, at least. Anyway, Paul and I were just sort of saying, honestly, if you were like them, imagine putting yourself in their shoes, and more or less any company comes to you and says, "Here's a ton of money." It's it's not going to be as straightforward as a decision to just sort of say, "Well, I don't know that I align perfectly with the history of that company." They've done such hard work.
You don't have to, though. You don't have to. I mean, all the products we use have got dubious things going on all around the world, from whether it's the phones that we use to the laptops that we use or whatever. But I think probably I would want in my contract that I didn't have to publicly support some of their other products and say that they were good. And as long as I didn't have to do that, I would take the money.
Yeah.
And to be honest, if they said you have to support the other products, I'd still take the money.
Yeah.
But if I didn't need, but yeah, I mean, I think EIG owns a couple of big hosting companies. Bluehost is one of them. I think HostGator is one of them, and they get a lot of bad press. I've used HostGator years ago. Actually, never had a problem with it. Nothing ever went wrong, but I've never used it in the modern times. Bluehost used to be one of the cool kids at one point, and but I've never been burnt by the EIG companies. But I believe everyone who says that they genuinely have, and so I can only believe those people. Most of the people who are saying that would have been burnt by something EIG has had are probably the people who are smart enough to also say, I was already kind of looking at alternatives to Yoast anyway, because I'd found more edge products, whether it's SEO Press or SEO Framework, and I was moving over to those. Most of the time I've seen someone complain about the EIG thing, they said that as well, or a lot of them did. So I think this is just part of what WordPress space looks like now. It's all getting bought out. The community does feel a little bit left out to a certain extent, that everything's been bought out. But I can only see this going from this plugin going into the stratosphere. Really, I think it's there'll be a SaaS version of it or something. I don't know what they'll do, but they don't buy something that big and then and all they're going to do is pre-install it on Bluehost hosting accounts. I think they must have some big plans for it. The last thing I said, I brought something up on Twitter. Bluehost is owned by EIG or Newfold, whatever. They are listed on the WordPress.org recommended hosts page, of which there's only 3: SiteGround, Bluehost, and DreamHost, I think. And I just brought up that I felt it was the time now to remove that page from WordPress.org. Now that one of those 3 hosts owns a plugin that it will put into its pre-installed hosting accounts, and I think that Bluehost can't sit on that page and not get people coming up with theories that there's something dodgy going on there. If you can have a situation where that page actually is massively helping the plugin as well because it's pre-installed. Yeah. So I think it's time to revisit that one. There's my brain dump on that. That didn't really leave any questions as such. But Brian, I don't know if you've got anything you want to add as well. Obviously,
yeah, I come at it from a different angle, right? Because on some level, some of the negativity that comes around things like this, I've had to deal with. And in fact, twice this week, uh, I've been sort of dogged again for, quote, selling out to, and screwing over my community and whatever these, allegations are,
Oh.
just, and so it's fresh in my, like, I literally just yesterday had to defend myself in a blog post, mostly filled with misinformation. Um, so what it does is it makes me think of a couple things. One, outside of myself, I think of who's saying it, right? People who are, and I'm sort of high level assessing this. People who are lazy in their business because, oh, this thing that just worked might not, and now I may have to come up with a solution, which means I have to do research or learn something new or whatever. So they kind of, oh, that's not fair, that sucks, I'm, this, they should, then you get sort of that peanut gallery approach. The second part of it is that there's a whole lot of envy going on when people start smacking around. It's like, oh, like this righteous, I would never sell, or how dare they sell, type of thing. I'm like, Paul, I think you said it, like, yeah, sure. If the right offer came at the right time, of course you'd sell. It's a lot of why we do what we do. But here's the one thing I'll say about Yoast, and I'll say it about myself because somebody made some comment about, I wish I had the article open, but I'm like, look, I didn't just jump off and jump around and do things. Like, if anything in the WordPress theme space, I was the longest tenured ever. Like at some point, 12 years of the same thing, it's time to do something different, and if you do it responsibly, we did at Studio Press, we picked the best partner, somebody who made commitments, somebody who fulfilled those promises, somebody who took care of the community, the product, like all these things. And you still get people who, on Facebook just the other day, oh, Brian Gardner sold out. I'm like, of course I did. Like at the time, it was either, and this introduces mental health issues. Like at the time, I was ready. I was ready to go. And if I felt forced because community people didn't want me to, quote, sell out and live on an island, which is of course never was the case. I think that's that pipe dream. Oh, he's sitting on an island and he doesn't care about us anymore. So not true. I was caring about myself and my family when I made the decision. But like at the end of the day, like Yoast has been around forever, like, of course, at some point, it's like, football players, at some point, they got to hang it up. And I'm not saying he's hanging it up or I'm hanging it up, but at some point it's time to just say, okay, I'm done bearing that weight, that responsibility, the conservativeness that he's experienced. We did at Studio Press, and that's why we sold. I sat across the table from Brian Clark and said, hey, Gutenberg's coming, and we have Rainmaker and Copyblogger and all these other things. If we can't give Studio Press and the Genesis brand the energy and the team and the power that I think it's going to take to really continue and do something special in the WordPress space, then I think it's time to sell and find somebody who can help us do that. Right. That's exactly what we did. We found WP Engine, we've got product managers. There's teams over there, like around Genesis, like 10 times as many people who were ever working on it are working on it now. So I get really really defensive when I see people in Twitter or Facebook or wherever talk about, oh, how WP Engine's done this and that, and they've dropped the ball and all these things. And the first thing I do is jump in and say baloney. Like, and I'm not even intimately involved anymore like I used to be, but I sat on calls with 10 people who were talking about what to do with Genesis. Before it was Nathan and I. Like, that's 5 times as many people. So I come at it from that perspective. So I'm a little bit fired up right now because, like I said yesterday, I would defend myself. I'm like, come on, people. I'm like, it's either it's
been such a long time as well.
Like,
yeah.
Well, exactly. And I was accused of coming back and abandoning the Genesis community. And I'm like, first of all, do you realize Frost is a Genesis theme? No. Okay, there goes half your argument, Like, so people just, it's easy to have opinions.
It is, isn't it? And I think what's curious to me, one of the things that I noticed, not just on places like Facebook, but elsewhere, is that the first thing that tends to happen is that all these threads open up on social media about what's the alternative that you're now going to start using, it, as opposed to, oh, this is curious, let's see how this works out. Just like, what are you going to use instead? So there was lots of posts about, well, what's going to be your new favorite SEO plugin. I just thought I'd share the actual text, because I did think that was quite nice. It says, Marika and I have felt since this COVID pandemic hit that we need needed a partner or some more financial backing, said Yoast of Volk. Being totally bootstrapped was getting to us. We worried about the exchange rate of the dollar, for instance. We got risk averse. And all around us, other companies got financial injections. So a bit of perspective there. They were feeling that particularly without the money, they were going to be left behind because of the way it created a sort of risk averse culture between the two of them. And of course, it's the baby. They've been doing this since day one, and you want to. You got 140 people on your payroll. You want to do the right thing for them, and giving them this stability is a good thing.
I agree with Brian on this. I mean, I shut down in December a company of 4 employees, and it wasn't a sellable company. So I had to make a decision, that those 4 people would need to find other ways to put food on their table as such. And if you first of all, a number of things, like what Brian said, if you are the co-founders of Yoast and you've made something super successful, and at some point you literally are just saying to yourself, I just want to stop now.
Yeah.
I want to do something different, or at least in a year after I've done my sort of tenure with what I need to do. What are you supposed to do? Just shut it down and say, okay, 140 employees times perhaps 2.5 children or whatever. Let's just say that's they put food on the table potentially for around 500 to 600 people. You can't just say, oh, I'm not going to sell out because some people will give me a hard time on social media or something like that. The thing is, me and Nathan had a call earlier, just like, how's it going? How was your holiday? And one of the things Nathan had to do was give me a bit of a pep talk on ignore things people say on social media. So, so I didn't really ask him about his holiday. I just went, woe is me. Some things on social media are annoying me. And Nathan just pointed out that the voices who are very loud on social media about any subject are not the majority. So in Brian's case, he has to defend himself when a couple of individuals will have a go at him, but the majority of people either don't care or wish you all the best. And I think that's the same thing for Yoast. It's an interesting talking point that EIG was the one who bought them. But the only people who really care about that are us enthusiasts who are completely nerding out about every single aspect about it. So I'm glad that the co-founders can, like they said in that post, there's things starting to bother them. They grew huge. They're almost potentially even asking themselves, is this too big for us now, where this would end up going? Is it time for someone else to take the reins? And that's what they've decided to do. Good luck to them. They've secured those careers for all of those people who work for them for the foreseeable, for as long as they possibly could, and they've made that decision. So I just think all the best to them, really, and the social media fallout will always happen.
It will. Kind of it really will. And yet there's the vast majority of people will say nothing. Yep. And they probably will agree with you. It's only that, like Cameron's just said in the comment, the loudest voices often aren't the smartest either. I think Brian's got something else he wants to add. Yeah. So back to you, Brian.
Yeah, following up on Paul, what you just said, nobody knows. I mean, everyone wants to know how much money it was, but nobody knows sort of what the rest of the deal looked like, right? I know when... Yeah. And not many people know this. I don't broadcast this, but I sometimes feel like I need to. When WP Engine, we were talking to them and others for that matter, but WP Engine, there were 2 non-negotiables. We were not going to sign a contract to sell Studio Plus unless these 2 things were met. One, they had to continue the product. Like, in other words, they couldn't just buy it and shut it down, which would have made no sense because they really were buying the brand and the product and the community, the developer community that went with it. And number 2 is they got to take my people, right? Like, I wasn't going to sell and they were going to fire everybody. This is not an asset purchase. This was, it was part of, we had other offers where they wanted to do that. And I was a non-negotiable. I said, I will not sell to you on, it would have been difficult had it been a significantly higher amount of money. I still wouldn't have done it. But, at the end of the day, I told him, I'm like, look, and it was the smaller team, we didn't have 140. So the scale's smaller, but we had like 10 or 12 people where I was like, look, there's, first of all, 10 or 12 people who I directly know make money from what we do and put food on the table. You have to take them over, or at least have to put them and try to figure out a way to do it. And I believe everyone came over that chose to. So there was that. But even the community part of it, hundreds of people in the Genesis community have businesses and put food on their table by what we do. So there was a lot of people, and people just say, oh, he sold out, he's on an island, da da da. They don't realize like the deal structure, which had some non-negotiable things. And I'm going to only assume that Yoast and his wife had something similar. It's like, hey, we're not going to do this where you're just going to whack off 140 people, because that's not fair and that's just not who we are. So I think people need to consider that stuff too.
That's really interesting that you mentioned that. I think that's a really cool thing to have brought up. And the article does make clear that it says, the wording is, whilst Yoast does not plan to change the 140 person team, it's bringing in fresh talent, in fact. And apparently they've got 19 job openings. I don't know if they're off the back of this new investment that they felt that they can get 20 more people on board or not. But yeah, that is really interesting, the non-negotiables. Did you feel when you had those two non-negotiables, did that kind of give you butterflies? Did you think, all right, I'm going to stick with this come what may? In other words, was it easy for you to go to these companies like WP Engine and say those things? Or did you feel like, oh no, you might really muddy the water or spoil the deal?
It was, and again, I've also said this, and I will say this even to Jason Cohn and Heather. At the start of it, WP Engine was not at the top of the list of people who I thought I would want to sell to. I just had some misconceptions around them, and very quickly in the negotiation process and just the conversations, I was like, man, I was dead wrong about their company, their culture, all that stuff. And the fact that there wasn't any pit in my stomach when I was having these conversations with them, and I think that's like why I think they kind of assumed that was going to be the case, right? They came in and said, this is not what we're interested in. We're interested in the community, the brand, the people, all of it, and me on some level. And so it was just like, it was more of just like a reinforcement, just, hey, making sure, guys, that this is the plan, rather than, oh, it's this way or no way kind of an approach. And they were like, of course, that's exactly what we had planned. We're going to continue the product. We want to bring your people over. Why would we disrupt something like that? And I believe the Flywheel acquisition was very much the same. They brought the team over intact. They left the brand alone. So in most cases, I can't speak for EIG because I just don't know all of what goes on over there. But at least in our case, it was really, and when we had that conversation, I was like, to our team, I was like, yeah, this is the right partner. Somebody who looks at it this way is clearly people who we want to do business with. So
this conversation really is the conversation of our time in WordPress. This whole mergers, acquisitions thing, it really does seem to be, apart from Guttenberg and all the things surrounding that, it really does feel like merger and acquisitions are a really important bit of the ecosystem at the moment. With that, I am going to replug my my podcast episode with Corey Miller, because we strayed and we've used more time on this than I think we were anticipating, and just makes me feel this is actually quite an important topic. Corey really did open up about this, and he gave me lots of points to think about. So go and check that out. Episode 6, wptavern.com/podcast. Right. Shall we move on?
Yeah. Should we just do a quick shout out to David Von Gries's video?
Yes. And, sorry. Before we do that, can I just put up one more comment? Where's it gone? And it was to do with your thing there, Paul. He was talking about the page on WordPress.org. Yeah. Is it WordPress.org? Yes. With the recommended hosts, and Peter saying he thinks maybe in the spirit of WordPress, it's now time to have that page taken down as well. So.
We'll see.
Okay. Yeah. Don't have too much hope. But
I think it's been going on for 10 years, that debate. But yeah.
Okay. You want to mention? I can't play you a video, so I'm just showing you a screen. This is the best screenshot I could get of David. Every time I moved it along to get a better screenshot, it ended up with some sort of half eyes closed kind of thing. So, David, apologies if that's not the best photo, but there we go. This is David's video. Tell us about it, Paul.
So yeah, if you just look up David Von Gries on YouTube, you'll find this video, and he's started doing a bunch of videos now, actually. And this video is one that seemed to get quite a lot of reaction to it in various parts of mainly in the Facebook kind of community, and also on Twitter. The video is called "Is Gutenberg Killing WordPress Themes?" ? Challenges for a theme developer in a Gutenberg world. And it's just David's very honest and open take on the challenges of having a theme that was built in the age of when page builders were, emerging as it. So you could kind of say that, Genesis was one one generation, and then the generation after that was, Page Builder Framework and Generate Press and Astra, perhaps. So those bunch of different themes. So he's come into this from that generation where he's looked specifically at page builders, and he's kind of talking about the frustrations with Gutenberg, but he's not ranting about it at all. He's just making everybody aware of what those challenges are, and also the decisions that he has to make for his company in and around what parts of Gutenberg he will or won't support. One of the things that he said is tricky, and maybe theme.json will solve this for him in the future, I don't really know the extent of how far it goes, is that when he was working with any of the page builders, whether it's Elementor or Beaver Builder or any of those different tools, he would find that the design system was purely contained inside that page builder, and the theme knew what it needed to do, and the page builder knew what it needed to do. And there was, and yes, there was some crossover things that needed to happen, but it was quite simple for themes to see what the role of a theme was and what the role of the design tool was. And what he's saying is that he finds it quite difficult to find that line of where his customizer type settings should override Gutenberg things or vice versa. And so it's just really a really good, interesting video on that kind of challenge and a few other things as well. And that's an opinion straight from someone who is working within this. So he's got like the opposite problem to Brian in a way, in that, Brian, you're going with core from the beginning of core. David Von Gries is having to not exactly fight it, but he's probably got a lot more things to do every time there's a release than he used to. And is that killing WordPress themes? It probably will. It probably will kill a lot of them. Let's say you're a theme shop that hasn't been doing too great recently, and you're already overworked and not necessarily making too much money, and it doesn't look like anyone wants to buy you. And then you've got a whole bunch of other things to worry about, and your support tickets are going up. Some people are going to drop out, absolutely. And some of those won't come back in with a new offer. They will just drop out and do something completely different. So that's it, really. The video just highlights that kind of challenge. It's not a rant. It's just observing from within what it's like. As for Page Builder Framework, I don't think that'll be going anywhere because it always stayed simple. So yeah, David's got more work to do to make it fully compatible with Gutenberg and the Gutenberg future, but he kept things simple from the beginning, and I think that those kind of themes will probably be fine because they will have a huge audience still with page builders, and they'll be able to not have too hard a time with the Gutenberg approach as well. Any other thoughts on that are absolutely welcome. That was just my take on the video, and Brian, you've probably not watched it, to be honest. Because we only told you about the links about
about 53 minutes
ago. Been watching it the last 10 minutes. No.
Yeah. No, I think we'll press on. So the next one, by the way, can I just say this podcast episode is sponsored by Shure FMV7. Notice that all three of us have got the exact same.
We have, yeah.
What's the chances of that?
Fashion victim. Yeah. That's what we are.
The same arm too, I think.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Yes.
Road
arm. And grief. Yeah. And anyway.
It is a fantastic combination, though.
It is.
I've got another arm over here. And it was a really trendy one, and it cost more than the Rode arm as well. And I put it on, I was like, wow, that looks so good. We haven't got this metal bit showing.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't as maneuverable as this thing. It's fantastic. So
yeah. For those of you that haven't come across this mic, the best bit is not only is it a nice Shure mic, but it's got a bit of software for your Mac or PC, which does all the audio. So yeah, and you can plug it in with USB, which is nice. You can see on Brian's one, which makes it dead easy to use for podcasting. Right. Okay. Next one is over on the Toolset website. This we'll probably just cover this briefly because we've covered something like this before. Yeah. This is just a nice little article where the Toolset guys go over the similarities and differences between their offering and the new query loop block. So the query loop block, if you haven't come across it. It's brilliant. It's just nice to have this in WordPress core where you can sort of say, I would like to show a bunch of posts, please, and I would like only these types of posts, and I would like to show a featured image and a bit of metadata. That would be lovely, and I'd like to show it in a basic grid. That kind of stuff you can do. But obviously, Toolset wanted to go a little bit further, and right from the very beginning of Guttenberg, it seems like they just dropped all their initiatives of their own to do layouts, and they thought, let's go with the block editor. We'll just use whatever comes, a bit like Brian, really. We'll go with what's in core, and we'll adapt that. And so that's what they've done. And so this is a nice little article basically saying, here's how you can produce a nice, simple loop with the core offering. And then right at the very end, I always appreciate this when a post is explanatory, and then at the end they tag on their little, and here's what you can do with our stuff as well. I think that's a really nice way of doing it. Then they go to show the sort of the way that you could finesse it and add a little bit more. So for example, you could pick all sorts of different fields and style it in a much more point, click, drag kind of way. You can, if you're looking at the screen, you can see, for example, over on the Guttenberg side of things, I don't think you get the color customizations and the things like the border shadow and box radius and all that kind of stuff, but you do on the toolset side of things. So just a nice little article, and we constantly keep coming back and bigging up Toolset, because for me they're doing a really great integrating all the words core stuff. We had a few little problems, didn't we, Paul? We tried to build something a couple of months ago, and we ran into some little problems, but no doubt the team are on it.
It wasn't Toolset's fault, actually. It was just cutting edge tools, the cutting edge blocks with cadence and the cutting edge aspect of Toolset just colliding and not quite being fully compatible. But I think that they've probably solved that problem. I reported it to both of them anyway, but it was just a bug, as you get with these kind of things. Something that me and Nathan were talking about before the show about this is when you see, you sometimes wonder, are the core team not taking any notice of things that have already been done really well outside and using those ideas. I've come to the conclusion now that, and this isn't a conspiracy theory at all, is that the WordPress core team is essentially building something for WordPress.com, but it's not just building for stuff for people, for their product WordPress.com. It's also building a product for anyone who wants to use it in a new way, aligned with the way that WordPress.com using it, like Frost WP's approach, or if you're an independent website owner and you want to have, I've seen this analogy before, choices, not options. So people will be able to have themes that are specific to certain verticals, for instance, and all the blocks that they might need are in there. And then if they needed something extra, then they go to the third party to get that, whether it's a slider or animations or some custom code or something. So I'm now thinking that they are deliberately not looking at something like Toolset and saying, wow, look how Toolset handles the design capabilities you can have in the loop. I think they're saying, that's great. It already exists. If you want that, use Toolset. You'll be in the 20% of people that creates the 80% of the websites, the agencies, the freelancers, and all those kind of things. But it's probably too complicated for a lot of the people who are going to be using something like this in WordPress.com or in other kind of pre-packaged, you don't need to think about this too much solutions. It's putting my mind at rest that I've come to that conclusion, that I'm wondering sometimes, why are they just not looking at other things? I think that they probably are, and they're saying, let's not do that. Let's do it this way and keep things simple. So their query block is all block-based, as far as I can tell. I've never tried it. Whereas the Toolset one is far more relevant to someone like me that wants it in a block perhaps, but wants to actually put their own custom code and classes into the HTML output there. And they can do that with Toolset, but you can't really do that, I don't think, with the query block that comes with core. So I think that that's what's happening. I think that they're seeing things that are being done better than they are for edge cases, but they're deciding to keep core into blocks, and everything will be built from blocks. And that if you want to override it, you will use a third party, of which there is plenty of choice to be had there.
I've just shown this comment from a Facebook user. I don't know who you are. Apologies. Seems like I have to check out Toolset again. Yeah, that kind of comment seems to be coming up more and more. Got it in the toolbox. Maybe bought it a few years ago. Haven't used it. But maybe it's time to bring it back out. Yeah, honestly, give it a try because they've really embraced the whole Guttenberg thing.
There was a post on Talk. Remember that post on Talk? I forget the talk.com, is it?
Talk.io.
Talk.io, yeah.
Yep.
And they interviewed a bunch of agencies and freelancers specifically on who had moved over to using blocks over page builders and traditional themes. Almost everybody was either at this point using Toolset or GeneratePress blocks to achieve what they were doing. That was the majority tool that people were using at that moment. So you could see that if you were adopting it as an agency, you were needing to pull in those third parties at this point. But give it another year, that could all change.
Paul, I think something you said is an important delineator here in how WordPress chooses to approach these things. You said edge case just a few minutes ago. I think there's probably a person or a committee that does look at these things and say, okay, we've fallen short or we've got it to a point. Do we need to extend it? In other words, are we extending it because it's edge case or are we extending it because it's going to be globally used a certain way? I think groups are my favorite thing that ever happened to WordPress the block group. I think that was in response to what several block libraries out there had, like their own container block, I think is what they called them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in that case, they're like, hey, that's an idea we need to have because that's a globally used and can be really, really helpful. The tool set thing, like, hey, we're going to bring it to this point. If we take it any further, it becomes just edge case and then sort of becomes too much. But I think back to like Woo themes in the menu system, like that's a perfect example of WordPress saying, hey, someone way ahead of the game and we want it exactly the way they've built it. So we'll fork it and bring it in or work with them to, that's an example of WordPress, the project saying, looking at the community, seeing what they're doing. So I do think on some level, there's a degree of, yeah, that's something we need to put into core. And that's something we shouldn't because it's too edge case. And I'll say this about Frost really quickly, and then we can move on. I would not have started Frost 6 months, 12 months, a year and a half ago because WordPress core just wasn't at a point because of my dedication to using, quote, the WordPress way. It wasn't ready sort of the way it was now. And so I feel like, and this is like why I feel like Frost is good for its market, a good product, because there's so much I feel that we could do now with WordPress core blocks. Like I don't have a need to reinvent or build or go further. Like there's markets everywhere. There's markets for Toolset who say we want to extend this and bring it into this market and make it do this. And then there's me who's like, hey, there's 40% of the internet. There's a small segment of that who just needs a basic site and some configurations on a homepage, and that's enough. They just want it well designed, good typography, stuff like that. And that's where we're choosing to kind of stay with Frost, and why it's easy to sort of at this point, 6 months, a year ago, maybe not so much. But with like the group block and some of this theme.json stuff, which introduces content width and sort of capping things at certain things. Now I'm like, okay, now I feel like WordPress has equipped me as a product builder to do what I want to do.
Nice. We're kind of running out of time, sort of ish a bit. So I'm going to move it on. Automatic. They're getting into email. Well, not directly. They've invested $30 million in Titan. Paul, this is on you, isn't it? You're doing this one.
Yeah. So I was just looking at the screen. So they've bought Titan. Or
They've invested it.
Yeah.
Right.
So wow. I mean, how much does Titan cost to buy? You could buy my entire street for that. And I mean, this is a really good investment for Automatic. I don't understand why you would need to invest 30 million in a company and not buy it for the thing that they're doing with it. And that's just my ignorance to this how this whole thing works at this level, I think. But basically, what it's clear that they're doing already is implementing this into WordPress.com. So that when you buy a website per month from WordPress.com, you can have an upsell to have an email account for, I think it's $3.50. And then you will be able to leverage the Titan service at a very good price as an alternative to Google Mail or Office 365 and those sort of products. Now, Wix, I was in someone's Wix's site the other day just helping them out. Yeah, and there's some things they do really, really good in there, and it's the ability to purchase your domain and to purchase your website, and also to buy your email. And my wife's friend, whose website I was helping her with, had purchased her email through that. I think it was via Google. But the whole process of her, getting the domain, the website, and the email was so seamless. It was so easy. And I was kind of blown away how easy it was. And I think this is what WordPress.com is doing. They've brought in a partner. They've invested heavily into them. And you will now be able to buy WordPress.com website and with no complexity at all, have an email inbox that is to a professional level. And as I understand it about Titan as well, it has got a few cool features in that. I've never used it, but I heard a few people say it has almost like a ability to do almost like support ticketing. So you can kind of reorder and reprioritize emails within your inbox to say, oh, this is one I need to get back to, and this one's done, or this one needs to be, signed off to someone else or something like that. So for end users of WordPress.com, brilliant. For people wanting to stand up against the Wix and the pure corporate non-open source options out there, again, brilliant. And for Automatic to have an option that sits against any of the big hosting conglomerates that are now buying up, have their own POP-based email services or partnerships. Again, it's another option that people have got to go the WordPress.com route. And what they're essentially doing is cutting off the reasons why you wouldn't go with something like WordPress.com if that was in your list of possibilities.
I love this sentence on the. This article is by the way in the WP Tavern blog post. I love this sentence here. It says, "We need an alternative to Google and Microsoft." This is Matt Mullenweg, which have started to monopolize email. I was just thinking, imagine that sentence said, "We need an alternative to WordPress because it's beginning to monopolize the internet," said co-founder of Wix. just such an interesting take. But apparently, go back a number of years, Matt Mullenweg was all into Slack, and I think he believed that email was on the decline and would eventually sort of disappear. So this is a bit of a volte-face there. But yeah, I'm totally blown away by how you don't build an email company that's really good for $30 million if you're Automatic.
You get all the people though as well, don't you? I mean,
yeah, of course. And presumably this is a profitable company that they've invested in because they see a bright future for it. But honestly, it's just never even occurred to me that you could do your email through WordPress.com. I always just go to Google. That's my default. I just press the Google button and get everything set up that way. But yeah, if you've got a WordPress.com domain, click a button, $3.50 is pretty good. You said it, didn't you? Said it came with calendars as well, and
yeah, it's got a calendar
and
contacts built in. So those are the things the average DIY business owner needs if they're setting up a website on WordPress.com: email, domain, website. It's a good offering.
I think they'll do well.
Yeah.
You got any thoughts on this, Brian?
No, nothing of significant value that you guys have already said. So
okay. All right, in which case we're going to stray away from WordPress for one final piece. And I've got to be careful with my language here. Apparently, the acronym CP is what I'm going to use here. And CP is referring to images that are of a nefarious nature involving small human beings. I think we all know what I'm talking about. But I've been on holiday for 2 weeks, right? So I have no idea if this story has done the rounds, but I expect it has. But if you're the owner of an iPhone and you use iCloud, Apple have done something really curious. I think they've done it as best as they could, but I'm just interested on everybody's takes on this. So, okay, you're out and about and you're taking pictures or you're receiving pictures on iMessage or what have you. Basically, if a photograph lands on your iOS device and it gets sent up to iCloud, which is where it can go if you've ticked that box, I keep saying Google. Apple are going to download a database of CP images and hash your pictures, compare them, and they reckon it's a 1 in a trillion fail rate. Basically they reckon that all the nines except the last one is, they're going to get it correct. And if you have any of these photos on your phone, which are being uploaded to iCloud, they will get in touch with law enforcement and you will be in a bit of trouble. And if you're a child who is the recipient of one of these images and you are in the Apple ecosystem and you're on like the family plan, you're going to be told if you really want to open this image, that's fine, but we will tell your parents. And so I'm going to click this, but my parents are going to, I doubt they'll get the image, but they'll probably get the notification to say, your child has looked at this image. Okay, so they've done this in a really bulletproof cryptographic way. In other words, they don't see the picture, they just compare it to a hash which is coming from a verified police law enforcement database, and they're making that comparison. And if there's a positive, they will alert the authorities. Of course, the thing which came out of the EFF, which I thought was curious, is it's a slippery slope, they say, because now you've built into iOS the technology to do this. And so it wouldn't be too much of a stretch, or would it? I don't know. Too much of a stretch for a government to say, actually, do you know what? If dear Apple, if you want to operate in our country, if you've got any pictures of this event which happened, which our government don't think should have happened, can you just tell us about those people as well? And although Apple, I'm sure, would never do it, the fact is they've built the platform to enable it. Nobody could argue that CP needs to be stamped out. But I'm just curious from a technological point of view what you guys think. It's just interesting. Apple, in some way, able to inspect your photos. Not really, but kind of. Yeah. Yeah, I know. That's the perfect commentary.
I have, first of all, like if it's an opt-in thing, there's that. I'll give them that.
Oh, it's if you're using iCloud,
right,
then you've opted in. So you have to if you're
not going to not use iCloud because of this, because iCloud, you want to use it for its thing. So it's opt-in, but not really. It's probably most of me haven't given it a whole lot of thought that it's more like just because you can build something, some sort of a technology thing, doesn't mean you should. I mean, is Apple really like trying to police this, or I don't know. Like, I think to your point, like all of a sudden it goes from, CP to like, hate crimes, and like, where do you draw a line? Like, hey, if you see a gun in a picture with a kid holding it, like all of a sudden knock down his door. Like that to me seems a little too, and not invasive, because I don't want to be sensitive to the fact that it might save lives and people and things like that. But it's, I don't know. It just build software, like help people communicate, do work. Like,
it's really curious. And I think I don't know what the law is in the United States. I don't even know what the law is in the United Kingdom, but I imagine there's if that image is on your hardware, in other words, if it's on the Apple iCloud, presumably they're somehow liable for it. If there's a picture that shouldn't be on their hardware that is on their hardware, they want to get rid of that at the first available opportunity. And so I don't know if it's coming from that point of view as much as to help the wider community. It's just curious. The EFF saw this as there's now a backdoor, and whether or not we want to think about it, possibly governments might compel Apple in the future to, well, you've got the technology, just do it. Let's see pictures of I don't know, things. I want to see who's got a picture of this document or that document or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, Paul.
There might be, as I think about it real quick, there might be some element of scare tactics here too. Like, hey, we've got this now. It just might prevent people from doing it more, or switching over to like Google or Samsung or some other service. But, like if I now know that this is a thing, I just may not choose to send this thing. Like, so maybe there's an element of that, which is like it'll prevent it from people doing it just because they think they might get caught now.
Yeah. I was actually listening to a podcast of experts in this area not that long ago, a couple of days ago, and they were saying the 1 in a trillion is just pure guesswork. Like the idea that they can know how accurate their technology is, and how. Imagine you are that person who gets in trouble with the law because of the false positive. It's just like career-ending mistake, isn't it? It's just anyway, Paul.
So I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was talking about technology that gets developed, and basically there's this problem in a way, or it's not a problem, it's just a reality that we are innovating technology really, really quick. So if you take COVID, for instance, there's that argument about should scientist type people in labs experiment with viruses and make them much worse so that we can then experiment how we would fix that problem if it ever happened in nature or someone else was experimenting it for a bad reason. So it seems that there's always a situation that like we're always going to create software or innovations or technology or whatever that is going to endanger us as well. Like we're literally always creating tech that can kill us all or will make bad things happen to ourselves, and we can't stop that happening. Like we're always going to keep doing that. There's also a situation that there will always be some bad actors who will want to exploit that software or technology, whether that's governments or terrorists or just not nice people or whatever. And then there's basically us normal people as such who just who have no choice, but the technology is part of our life, and we've got no way of getting around that. Now, I don't have so much as a personal opinion on how you would, how you solve that, how you solve that conundrum as such, apart from I kind of agreed with some of the people on the podcast that were saying, I think we have to keep creating this technology, and then we just have to keep aspiring to use it in the most responsible way, because as soon as we as a kind of I don't know what we call ourselves, humans, are able to do something, yeah, those people over there may be able to do it first, but give it a year and everyone will be able to do it. So in the virus situation, the COVID situation, it's a case of right now, only people in labs can probably, change the super terrible version of this flu virus that was about H1N1, I think it's called, something like that, and make it, terrible. But, within like 10 years, that'll be doable in the classroom by, people just on a computer. They can press a few buttons and somehow they're able to create the DNA of a terrible virus that does something. So it's going to happen no matter what. And it kind of makes sense that we create this technology because it's happening, and then we try and use it responsibly, and then we try and use more tech to protect us people who are in the firing line of this.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
know.
not a cheery ending to the podcast today.
Well, do you know one thing? I think it was Elon Musk said was talking about the climate crisis. Actually, like how do we get people to care about it? Because it's too slow. It's too slow. We're just looking at it and going, yeah, I'm going to tweet about that. That's terrible, or something like that. And it's, and when most of us aren't doing something, then you've got governments who come in every 2 years or 4 years in democratic situations, and as soon as they get into government, they're now thinking about the next election, and and they don't really do what they're told.
Yes.
What they said that they would do. Elon Musk's approach to this is we need to make things that are so attractive and cool that you want it. And as a result, it saves the environment, whether that's a Tesla car or some other cool thing. Like in me, they might invent a baseball cap that eats carbon or something. I don't know.
It's genius.
Yeah, well, I need to get and quickly patent that. That's a good idea.
Quick, go to carboneatingcaps.com.
We just can't stop the technology, the onslaught. It's outpacing us. The clever people are outpacing us. So yeah, I mean, I hope that this will save a lot of children, basically, because and obviously there's freedom and privacy aspects and stuff like that. But I'm in the party that I would give that away.
Yep.
But I'm in a safe country. I live in the UK, so it's easy for me to say.
Yeah. Okay. Picks of the week. I've got one. It's going to be dead quick, and then we'll end it if nobody else has got a pick of the week. This is called SueMe.news. It's free for 10 things, and it's $19.99 if you want to upgrade, and you can have unlimited things. It's one of these lifetime deal things. Actually, it's not. It's their pricing. That's just what they ask for. It's basically like an RSS reader, blog, so you can stick a URL in, or an RSS feed, or a Twitter handle, or a Tumblr handle, or a YouTube URL, and it will start to create a feed for you. And it's dead simple. It basically looks like that. So it's just the bare bones with a little excerpt, perhaps an image. And I just thought it was really cool, the fact that you can amalgamate. It's like an RSS reader on steroids with extra things. And it's called SueMe.news. And I've subscribed and I really like it. It just presents all, so I can put everything into one big feed. and never look at it like like you do. But that's all I've got. Paul, you got a pick of the week?
Well, I didn't. I forgot to do it. So I'm going to
right.
go with the film Aspen Extreme that
Okay.
was recommended to me from
Yeah.
Brian Gardner. It's a
you've
good film
stolen
so
his.
far.
Yeah.
That's really his one. And
Yeah.
also another cool thing that I got from Amazon this week was a spirit level for the top of my camera that I'm using here for the streaming, because it's always slightly wonky. And then I was like,
Are you kidding?
yeah,
You are.
and it sits on top of the camera, and I don't know what that thing's called, the shoe part or
Yeah.
something.
Bit at the back.
Yeah, the shoe, it slots into there, and then when I'm setting it up and turning it, I can just check, and it's perfectly straight.
I don't know what you're on about.
Yeah.
It's always straight, my camera.
So I didn't know it's that sort of thing that you don't know it exists until you need it.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah,
was
no,
about
honestly, I've
£2.
no
It's great.
problems with my camera ever. It's always in. That's okay, fair enough. Thank you, Brian. Anything?
Yes, and I'm wearing one right now.
Ooh.
Lifestyle stuff. I was going to go nerdy, but I'm like, you know what? No. I see people talking about like, oh, where do I buy the best quality shirt and things like that. And Jeff Sheldon, gentleman, runs a company called ugmonk.com, UGMONK. He's been around for more than a decade. He's completely self-funded, bootstrapped and everything. And for simple, clothing items and just other, productivity things are like around desks and workstations and stuff like that. I actually have a leather mouse pad by him too. He's one of those kind of people you're like, support the small guy, right? You don't need to go buy a t-shirt from so-and-so. I've been wearing these shirts. I wore like 5 of them. I think I just rotate through the same grays.
That's great.
They're like $35 or $40 shirts, but it's kind of what you pay for. Like I haven't had to buy any for like 3 years now.
Yeah.
And Jeff's a great guy. He's a designer. So like we have that affinity going on. So just a quick plug for Jeff and what he's doing.
What was it again?
Ugmonk, UGMONK.
Ugmonk.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
The site is it's beautiful. Everything he touches is beautiful. So
yeah, he's got loads of
yes.
like it. So it's shoes, pens, shirts, like little booklets that you can write in notepads and all. I'll just quickly put it on the screen. Yeah, that looks nice. I'm like you. Basically, whatever's on the top of my drawer when I get to it, that's what's going on my body that day. Yeah. The top t-shirt is the one that's going. So I just basically have 4 t-shirts. They hit the wash, go to the top, back on again, and they're always these. They're always the same. But yeah, got it. Nice, looks good. I'll add it to the show notes. That's good.
Cool.
Okay, I've got nothing else. I don't think anybody else has. So we'll probably knock it on the head. Thank you so much. Episode number 174. If you enjoyed it, share it. If you didn't enjoy it, share it. And
share it anyways.
Yeah, just share it anyway.
Things.
Yeah, we'll be back next week. We're gonna go and track down in the virtual wilderness Jonathan Wold and make sure he's all right. But thanks to Paul, co-host, as always, and Brian Gardner for joining us this week. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week. We've got to do the wave thing now. Got to do the wave. See ya. Bye.